Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Heather Boydman. I'm an AmeriCorps member serving
with Chagrin River Watershed Partners. And thank you so much for joining us. And I'm here with John Kehn from the Division of Forestry. I'm getting tongue-tied here. All right, John, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming on. If you have questions as we go through this webinar tonight, please put them in the chat, and Heather will let me know, and we can have a dialogue as we move along. Otherwise, you're just going to hear me talk. I'm John Kehn. I'm the Northern Service Forestry Coordinator for ODNR Division of Forestry. We work with private lands on all forestry matters, everything from tree planting to harvesting. We are mainly educators as much as we can be. We work with the auditor's offices on tax programs. We work with consulting foresters, and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and a variety of partners in the region, Houghton Arboretum, the city of Akron, mainly doing education on managing woodland. So this is going to be a basic overview of some of the things that are going on up here, just what we help with, and I call it just Forestry 101. Now, we are going to talk a lot about marketing tonight. I'm going to go through some other basic stuff, but marketing is going to be the key topic. So with that, and Heather, anytime you need something clarified, you just chime in. I need that advanced once. My slide's not advancing now.
You should be able to say click on the slide.
All right, let's give it a try. There it goes. Okay. I've been finding that over the years, one of the things that is becoming painfully obvious is, to me, is many landowners have no idea what forestry is even referring to. They don't know what a forester is or does, and that leads to a big problem and a lot of mismanagement of the resource. So, you know, what is forestry? It's basically managing the trees in the woods for a wide variety of things. So it's not as complicated as many people make it out to be. It isn't. So now what a forester does, though, can be complicated, and there's different kinds of foresters we'll go over, but what a forester does is we try to teach a landowner how to manage their woods to meet goals that they have. Most landowners have not formulated goals. They don't know too much about their opportunities, but we teach them, you know, why trees are where they are, what has happened in past land use history, what we can do to meet goals, whether it's wildlife habitat, or diversifying wildlife habitat, growing timber, improving aesthetics, enhancing water quality, air quality, which isn't usually high on a landowner's list. They don't think about that stuff too often. But typically we try to teach a landowner how to maximize the benefits of the resource. Now, the forest products resource in Ohio, it's a huge industry. I think the last study said $29 billion annual economic impact for forest products. Believe it or not, that's higher than corn and beans. Most people don't realize that. We have the #1 high-grade furniture. We are the #1 high-grade furniture producer in the country, in Ohio. We're also ranked very high in many other products. So it is a huge resource for us, and it's also a very beneficial resource for, again, wildlife habitat, aesthetics. It's a tremendous resource, but I will say that it's largely unmanaged. It just is not, it's not well managed. And I tell the farming community at times that, you know, if I told you you could grow 800 bushels of corn per acre per year, they would just be all ears and want to understand why that is. But if I tell people you can grow 4 times the board footage of timber with a little bit of management, they don't have no idea what I'm talking about. So we don't have a lot of resource professionals that understand this resource very well, and we're working hard to educate partners in the northeast part of the state, and well, everywhere, but northeast we're getting some traction. We work with Farm Bureau, again, the auditor's offices, groups like Chagrin River Watershed, Cleveland Metro Parks, and the others I mentioned earlier. So we do a lot of partner building, a lot of education, in addition to teaching landowners individually what they have. We walk properties for people and teach them what they can do with their woods. Now, with this, I think you guys can see my cursor. I just want to explain a little bit. You know, when I look at a picture like this, I see how trees, you know, we teach people how trees grow, why they are the way they are. Let's do a for instance on here. I look at this picture and I look at this tree in the background here, and it looks to me, this is not, in my opinion, a great tree. It may be aesthetically okay. It looks like it's very weak. It's going to fall apart. These are the things that jump out at me. This tree retains a large limb over here only because this side of the road at one time was cleared. And it's obvious because this tree could not have retained that limb had there been woods over here. So when we're teaching landowners what they have, we're going through a woodland and looking at the species and looking at the condition, the stocking levels, and all those things to determine how we can grow, or what we need to do to grow a good, healthy woodland. Like I say, most of them in the Northeast they're not managed at all. And quite frankly, we have probably the worst harvesting practices of anywhere in the state up here in the Northeast. Large stationary portable mills are used up here and nowhere else in the state. When I moved here, I couldn't believe what I saw 12 years ago or 10 years ago. And I had no idea these things were being used. And landowners just make big mistakes because they don't know to call us. They don't know to call a forester, or they just don't know what we do. And it's a big issue. So we're going to get into the marketing aspect of things and what landowners should do in order to avoid making some big mistakes. Now, before I do that, I want to talk about the different types of foresters. Now, I'm a state forester. I work for ODNR, again, as an educator mainly. We have 24 foresters working with private landowners across the state. Most of us cover 3 to 4 counties, and there are several thousand landowners per county. So we're spread fairly thin. We help landowners with the property tax reduction programs. One is called the Ohio Forest Tax Law, which we administer. And the other that we assist with is current agricultural use valuation, or CRWP. Now, those two programs do drive a lot of management. If a landowner has to have a management plan in order to retain a reduced property tax rate. So those programs are drivers to good management, or can be. Unfortunately, with CRWP, which is administered by the auditor's office, you get new auditors. This year, there's 27 new ones out of 88, and they come into that office, and oftentimes it's a very steep learning curve, and they're charged with making decisions about a resource that they really know very little about. That is something we're trying to change, to where we are more in tune with training them. But anyway, that's a different ballgame. The other types of foresters we have, there are private consulting foresters. Those are foresters who work for the landowner, mainly doing management plans for the tax programs, but also their bread and butter is timber sales. They handle timber sales sometimes that is a tool we use. As often it's a tool we use to improve a woodland. And private consulting foresters, we're going to go through that process in a little bit, but we've got a few. We're recruiting as many as we can. We're doing pretty good up here in the Northeast, but I think if we could spend more time doing outreach, we would need a lot more of them, because still the problem we have is 85% of landowners who sell timber do so without the help of a forester, and they make huge economic mistakes typically, and it's just it's a thing that it's a percentage we would love to get a much higher percentage of people using foresters when it comes to timber marketing, because they make such a mistake. So we have the state foresters, we have private consulting foresters. There are what we call procurement foresters. Those are people with a forestry degree who are buying timber for a company. They're working for a sawmill and purchasing timber to feed that mill. They kind of have to wear two hats, and it's not always easy for them to do. And it's kind of a different thing. So those are the main three types of foresters. Now you also have, and what confuses landowners often is they equate loggers with foresters and timber buyers with foresters. There are many timber buyers who are working for themselves or for several mills or one mill, and they don't always have the landowner's best interest in mind, and they're not foresters. So that's something to keep in mind, and that's typically, I don't like any of my clients to go through timber buyers directly or loggers directly. There are cases where that can work and needs to be done, because consultants have to have a certain amount of timber to sell before they're going to take a sale. But typically, if with my clients, I'll make the call whether we need to have a sale, and we can actually improve the woodland by having a sale, and then get them in touch with a consultant. Now, one of the first things we typically do with a landowner is try to find out what their goals are. Some people live on their property. Some people, we try to find out why they own the property, what they want to accomplish. and then guide them through, okay, here's what you have, here's what you own, here's the species, here's the condition, here are the problems. And most, well, I would say most landowners really don't have a really good idea of what their goals even are. So we typically spend quite a bit of time going over that. We talk about the different, when I do a field visit, my first question usually is, what tax rate are you on? Some know, some don't. They don't know what the opportunities are. They don't know much. They don't know much about the different government programs. We'll talk about a little bit, which would be the EQIP program and the CSP program, Conservation Stewardship Program. EQIP is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And we do assist the NRCS with both of those programs. So, but again, when I do talks with people, and these webinars are a little bit more difficult, much more difficult actually than face-to-face, but we often go through all these things about marketing. But to really cut to the chase, all a landowner really needs to know is they need to convey what they want to have happen to that property, what success looks like for them, why they own it. You just need to be able to relay that to your forester, and then your forester will look at the resource and figure out what your opportunities are. I'll be telling you a lot of things, and other resource professionals or marketing foresters will tell you you've got to do this, 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 and this. But the bottom line is you really just need to be able to express what you want to have happen to your forester. So any questions so far? Nothing? Okay. All right. Well, some real common goals for landowners, and we get all kinds of inquiries from landowners. Some are hunters. They want wildlife habitat for certain species. Many people, especially here in the Northeast, have inherited a property and they don't know what to do with it. But timber production typically isn't at the top of a list, but many people end up selling timber when someone knocks at the door and provides or throws some money at them, and people bite and make a lot of mistakes. But recreation, aesthetics, many people live on their properties and they just like having a woods, and so that's something. Not too many buy it for an investment other than just to enjoy it. Non-timber forest products is kind of an up-and-coming thing. Houghton Arboretum is teaching people how to do the mushroom production and things like that. I don't run across that too often with my landowners. But what I try to teach landowners is let's maximize everything we can. I like to grow a high percentage of high quality trees so that marketing is an option. They may never want to exercise that option, but it's good to have the option in your back pocket. So again, goals is the number one thing. We try to find out what the landowner is trying to accomplish. Okay, so when we talk about, and I put this picture up just because I thought it was kind of amazing, but you know, harvesting timber the wrong way, we're not talking about what you're seeing in the picture here. We're talking about marketing and how people just do a terrible job of marketing and don't understand how to go about the process. So now what you're seeing here is a very common way of cutting. This is what's left after a portable mill. is set up on a site. What it's not showing you is the huge piles of slabs and sawdust that are typically left on the site. When I first saw this up here, I was stunned that people were doing this, and they're doing it all the time. There's probably 40 or 50 mills working the 7 counties or 8 counties up in this part of the state, and they're just devastating these woodlands, which is it's just a big mistake. Most of these woodlands have a wide variety of invasive species in them, and that's what, once a cut like this happens, they just explode. And we're really setting back the resource a considerable amount of years. But this is why even the resource professionals, when I first started teaching about marketing, were reluctant, because the only thing that went through their mind were these kind of cuts. They didn't understand that there's a way of doing this much differently than what they're used to seeing. So this is like I said, it's a portable mill cut. These guys will talk landowners into doing, they'll call it a select cut, and they're calling, they'll say, well, we're going to select everything at 12 inches at POC and up. And POC is point of cut. Now that's at the stump. So when a person signs a contract like that, they're basically giving all their timber away. But people do it routinely and lose tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know a recent case where a forester did an after the fact inventory of what was taken and an estimate of how much value was taken on a property, and it was a $500,000 is what he estimated, and the landowner got $67,000, and the woods looked like this afterwards. So it also devalued the property quite a bit. So this kind of stuff happens a lot. It happens up here in the Northeast way too much, and I'm doing talks and workshops and meeting with people to avoid this kind of thing. So after a landowner, I go out with the landowner. The first thing I like to do, I'm happy when a landowner calls us first before they do things. There's not much I can do if they've signed a contract with somebody. Once they've done that, there's just not, my hands are tied. There's just not much I can do. So I encourage landowners to call the service forester before they make any decisions or sign any contracts or do anything, to learn the marketing process. So now it takes a while for the guys to get out to properties at times because we're covering such big territory. But calling the state service force is a free service. We walk properties and advise landowners on what to do. I like for us to be there first because we have no vested interest in the property. We're just educating on what you have, what you can do. Now, the other reason I like for us to be there is many times landowners will call thinking they want to have a harvest because it maybe hasn't been done in a long time, and we'll go out and it's not even close to ready. There's lots of things that need to be done, and it may be decades from an actual harvest. And if our private consultants, who are, go back to that 85%, only 15% of the sales are being marked by private consultants, I need them marking timber, and I don't like them to be wasting their time going to a property that's not ready to cut. So, we can go make an assessment in a couple hours pretty quickly, and then advise the landowner on all of their different opportunities and all of the problems they may have in their woodland. So the service forester in the county should be a landowner's first call. And those of you who are on the webinar tonight, if you're a resource professional, understand that should be the first call for a landowner and the clients you work with. They should be calling us to get an assessment of what they own. That's just what the step one. That's step one. So when we go out to a property, we're looking at, of course, the size of the trees, but more the condition of the trees, their form, what kind of, whether damaged or low forks or multi-stems or kind of unsound. We're also looking at the species, of course, but it's more looking at a stocking level. Are they healthy or are they spaced way too closely, which is more common than not. A woodland generally overstocks itself and spends 30 or 40 years of their time. It takes roughly 100 years for trees to get from seedling to saw timber size class. It's not 30 or 40 like people think. Now we can speed that up quite a bit through thinning, but that practice is not done all that often. Thinning when trees are young, getting rid of the poor quality stuff when they're young is very beneficial to a woodland, but it's not done by many people. So back to the start, you have your service forester go out and look at a property, and like I said, it doesn't take us very long to make an assessment of whether we can improve this by using harvesting as a tool. And then the next step for us is to have the landowner get hold of a consulting forester to mark and administer the timber sale for the landowner. Now, as a service forester, we've already discussed goals with the landowner, and occasionally, probably more often than not, we do work with the consultants on a regular basis. And if they have questions and they know we've been out there, we will occasionally talk with them as they're trying to decide, okay, what did this landowner want, and what did we determine was the best way to go about doing a cut. But the consulting forester, I'm going to go through the process of once you hire a consulting forester to help you conduct a timber sale, what's kind of expected. Now, so I got some do's and don'ts of as a landowner. Some of the things you should never do. You never let a buyer decide which trees are going to be cut in the woods. That's the forester's job. A forester looks at things much differently than a timber buyer. We're looking at like I said, typically stands are unmanaged. The trees were never thinned. The poor quality stuff was never removed when it was small. So the forester is going to go into a stand of trees that's big enough, if they determine it's big enough to harvest and they can conduct a harvest, they're going to go after and prioritize getting out the lower quality stuff as much as possible and still sell the sale. That is just what they should be doing, because you want to improve that woods when you have a cut. So there's a whole bunch of stuff and parameters that a forester will think about as he's marking timber. It's much easier to show people in the field what we look at and what we see and what we're looking for. But a forester's job is to mark the trees in the sale, not a buyer's. Another warning is never sign a contract presented by a buyer. That's just you're just asking for trouble. I've seen lots of horrible contracts that basically once you sign it, you're pretty well done. And believe me, I've worked with hundreds of people trying to fix messes that they got themselves into by signing a contract that a buyer presents. Consulting foresters, when they're doing timber sales, they have their own contract. It's an extensive contract of all the things that they're responsible to make sure the buyer does. There's a lot of different things in it that the average landowner doesn't think about. But you want to rely on the consulting forester to work with you on establishing a contract that the buyers, will sign and abide by. And we'll go into that a little bit more. Never sell on shares. Selling on shares, like a percentage, is something really common in Southern Ohio. And we've been preaching against it for years. It's just not a, again, you have the buyer choosing the trees. You don't know, you as a landowner don't know who the fellow is selling to. You're just trusting them to give you, your cut of the logs. And it's just the most dangerous part about that aspect is legally you are a partner with the logger until everything's done. So you're just as liable for anything that may happen. So it's just a legal big no-no. And lastly, number 4 there is you never sell directly to one buyer. Now I have a caveat there, unless your forester tells you to, because once in a while on a small sale, you're very limited on who will cut a piece. But there are different ways of having a consultant, on a really small sale. Once in a while, they may just mark the trees and say, here's 2 or 3 guys, have them come bid on this, and you'll pay them an hourly. You'll pay the forester an hourly rate potentially. But anyway, typically you don't sell directly to one individual, and I'll go through the process here as we move forward as to why we don't, or how we don't do that. Anyway, so you go back, your forester that you hire he's working for you. He is going to get a percentage, he or she is going to get a percentage of the sale. But so, it's still the more they mark, the more they make. But a forester can get a bad reputation really fast if he does something that is basically goes against what the service forester has asked them to do, or the landowner ends up unhappy. So most of the foresters I know in this region are very good, very easy to work with. But they're going to mark an inventory every tree that's to be sold, and they mark it up high on the tree, up at chest height, and then they put a mark on the stump so they know after the tree was cut, it was one that they had marked. I've seen lots of woods that someone will go in and just paint up high, and that doesn't tell you anything. They'll go through, and what typically happens is someone, the buyers are watching obituaries and they're watching land transfers, and they're often sending cards out to these people asking if they want to sell their timber. And if they get a bite, usually the landowner says, well, which trees are you talking about? And a buyer will come out and mark the trees up high, and that's it. And some of them are relatively, they're honest about it, but there are enough. We have a bunch of good buyers, but we have plenty of bad ones who will take advantage of a landowner. And, they might go out and mark the trees and then come in with a contract that's very open-ended. I've seen that many, many times. So you have to protect yourself against that, and that's why you hire a forester. But a forester will mark every tree to be sold based on your goals, and they scale it and get how much board footage is in it. They compile a list of a set of trees that's for sale, and how much board footage or how much lumber is actually for sale in that sale. They will pull together a bid packet, and which goes to buyers, and good consultants are not going to send that bid packet to bad operators. They have the contract that they're in charge of making sure the buyers adhere to. So they're not going to send that bid packet to somebody that's a problem child. They're only going to sell to people that do a good job in the woods, and that's just because it makes their job a lot easier. And the good thing is most of the best buyers are, have good crews, and they will bid on timber. But these bid packets go out with the inventory of what's for sale to multiple buyers, and it depends on the size of the sale, the quality of the sale, as to how far the foresters will cast their net. We have a huge group of buyers in the Holmes County, Wayne County region that will come up here and outcompete some of our local guys on occasion. And we also have some decent local mills up here that bid on timber sales that the foresters put up for sale. But they send this bid packet out, and they usually give buyers 3 to 4 weeks to come and look at the sale and submit a bid on it by a certain date. And on that date, they will open the bids or collect the bids and call the landowner and say, hey, this is, here's what came in. And then the landowner has the right to refuse any and all bids. If things come in really poorly, the forester, a good forester, is going to say, yeah, this isn't what I was hoping for. Maybe we'll wait, 6 months to a year and send the packet out again. The paint will still be good on the trees. You don't have to take low bids, and they will advise you on that, whether it's good or not. Now, once you are working with your consultant, and bids come in, they'll say, yeah, this is probably a pretty good bid. Let's go ahead and take it. And the consulting forester, he's going to call everybody that bid and tell them what the timber went for. And I did this for a short time on the side when I was working with another division in ODNR, and it was always kind of interesting to me to call the guys and tell them who got the timber, and because there was a competitiveness between them, wondering how they could pay a certain amount for these sales and where the other guy was selling his material and all that kind of stuff. So it was always kind of interesting. But the point of like when you select a buyer, your forester is going to, typically they go with the top bidder because they've already weeded out who got the packet. And again, they're only working with good buyers. Now, in the contract, you'll have as a landowner, you'll have a contract with the consulting forester, or you should, as to what services he's going to provide to you. And so you should both know exactly and agree on the scope of their work. The other item is the contract with the timber buyer. And the forester, again, will walk you through that, and that is what they're going to administer to make sure the buyer complies with the contract. Now, it's typical that a forester, a typical fee for the forester is 10% of the sale. That's not an unusual. That's kind of a standard amount right now. But the contract is something you'll get 100% of the money up front. Usually, when a contract is signed, in the contract, the buyer has 12 months to come get the timber. Now, they're obligated, in that contract, they're obligated to call the consulting forester before they move equipment onto the site. And the forester is obligated, and this should be in your contract with the forester, that he's going to be there when they're opening up the site. And when they show up, typically when they sign the contract, they're going to put down a deposit. And it's usually, I used to charge 25%. I want them, it depends on a few things, the size of the sale and such, and different things, but you always have a deposit. As a consultant, I always, we're getting 10% of the sale, but I always advise my landowners. I said, okay, I want my first 5% because I've already marked the timber, inventoried it, sold it, gotten the contract together. It's quite a bit of work up front. So I would get my 5% when the deposit came in. So then in that 12-month period, when the logging company sends a crew in, or the sawmill sends a crew in, they bring a check for the remainder of the amount. And I always advise my landowners, you keep that, and I'll get my 5% after my last 5%, after the cut's been done, and you're satisfied that everything in the contract was abided by, and you're satisfied with my job of administering the contract. So you get all your money up front when you're working with a consultant, and I advise my landowners who are using a consulting forester, you got to keep them on the hook. You don't want to pay them the full amount before the sale's done, because they're obligated to come out, work with the crews, make sure things are being done correctly. All the reclamation and the best management practices are done. We do encourage foresters to turn in, or landowners to turn in, a notice of intent to harvest with our soil and water district. We've got some problems with that system, with the voluntary system. Many of the foresters don't really like to do it, and we're hoping to make some changes to that system to make it a little more palatable. But it does alleviate liability for the landowner if they have this thing submitted. Like if you have sedimentation going off-site onto somebody else, you can get dinged for that. And but if you filed that notice of intent, you've shown intention that you're gonna take care of that stuff, and you have a forester working for you to make sure nothing bad happens. Any questions yet, Heather?
I don't see any.
Okay. All right. So now you've gotten to the point where you've sold the timber, you've signed the contract, you've chosen a crew, or your forester has chosen a crew. The forester shows up when the crew gets there, and they discuss access, they discuss where log landings are going to be, any issues with fences, gas lines, any number of things. The forester is obligated to make sure that you, the landowner, are protected. And he's also got obligations to the crews to make sure that everything goes smoothly for them as well. So they are charged with administering the sale. They will come out, and they should come out periodically. It's not daily, but they need to come out every 2 or 3 days at the most to make sure that if a crew is working from the back of the property out and they're doing reclamation and such, you don't want them, as a forester, you want to be there. If there's a problem in the back, you don't want them running back there because you didn't show up and say, hey, I want this tree knocked down, or I want this needs graded better, or whatever the case may be. So they need to be on site periodically to make sure the crew's doing everything they're supposed to do, and that's just part of their job. Post-harvest reclamation is something that it's very important to do. It's something the forester is kind of he's obligated to make sure they put in best management practices. Most of it's for erosion control. The picture here you're seeing is a water bar where you're trying to divert water off of a roadway so it doesn't get enough speed to start eroding an exposed road. Some foresters seed the roads themselves. Some of them have it in the contract that the buyer does the seeding of the landing and the roadways or the main haul roads. It's just that all that stuff is kind of negotiated. But you need to be aware that kind of stuff should be done. And you can't always, there's things happen. And I've seen sales that were going great, and the guys had 2 loads or 2 skids to get out, and it starts raining, and they do more damage in 4 hours than they did in 3 weeks. And then they once in a while you have to have them come back and do some fixes. You don't like to have to do that, but a good crew will do it. Because they're buying from that forester, they're buying multiple sales over time, and so they don't want to upset the forester, because the forester is going to, if he has a bad crew, he's just not going to sell to that company anymore, or he's going to say something to the owner if a crew is doing things that they shouldn't be. So that's, again, the checks and balances of having a forester assist. Okay, and once you get that, once you've gone through the harvesting process, you continue management. Now, I didn't talk too much about general management, but what's going on in most of the state. And look around right now. This is the time of year, anything you see greening up right now, especially in central and southern Ohio, are invasive species. They get a couple weeks ahead on, and just be aware, this first 2 weeks of green up, and look at how much is out there, and almost all of it is invasive species. We have a plant called buckthorn, we have autumn olive, honeysuckle is atrocious. There are a lot of problems we have in our woodland as far as invasive species that are mainly from the Asian countries. It started coming in when the trade there took off 30, 40 years ago. And we just have problems all over the place in that regard. So just be aware of that. Now, for those of you who see that this is another portable mill site. And like I say, there's hundreds of them up here. And I don't understand why landowners allow this to happen. It's just, it shouldn't. If they do just a little bit of homework. These guys are, you know, a lot of them are funded by the pallet companies. In my opinion, they're prematurely cutting good potential timber way too early, and it's just what happens. And I've seen this many times, and often the property is degraded, invasive species blow up. Some landowners that were in the tax programs, the property tax reduction programs, get kicked out because they do stuff like this. They didn't pay attention to what we tell them, especially the Ohio Forest Tax Law program. You'll be generally taken out if you do this kind of stuff, and you go back to the regular tax rate. So this is just, it's common up here. You'll see these cuts all over the place, and it's just really something we're trying to avoid. So don't screw up, I guess. Call a forester, call your state service forester before you make any decisions in your woods. And with that, Heather, if there's any questions, that's the basic of how to market timber.
All right, I know.